Welcome to another micro tutorial where I am going to demonstrate a few things that have been requested with regards to framing paintings and hanging them. It's not a complex thing. There are a few little bits and pieces that I'd like to share with you that I've figured out along the way, which will hopefully help you with your practice in turn. So first I'm going to go through what I've got here on my table. Obviously I have my tray frame. Now this tray frame has been made by my local framers and this is how they send it to me. They send it to me with a hanger and with D-rings that have already been put on the back. And that leads me to the spacer that I have here. Now this is just MDF that I've cut, 9mm MDF. I'll go over how to handle spacers for tray frames like this when the time comes. What I've got here is a stack of business cards that I've taped together, and these are what I use to put around my painting to create an even space between the painting and the frame itself. And then what I've got here are my tools. This is my standard wire that I like to use for smaller paintings. So I tend to avoid having this on my larger paintings. However, smaller paintings like what I'm going to demonstrate today, it is okay to have a hanger on your painting. There are several different types of D-rings or D-hooks or D-hangers, whatever you like to call them. So I've got here a D-ring that is triangular in shape. It has 2 holes and it's spaced on either side. I've got a D-ring here where it is spaced lengthways rather than across. This one has 3, so it's even stronger. However, you might be limited by the size here of the actual head itself. I tend to go for the larger ones simply because it is much easier for collectors to hang. This one here, teeny tiny one, is the smallest one I would ever use, and I would only use it. This would be the largest sized artwork that I would put on that one. And what I've got here, which I demonstrated in the live demo, is a Z hanger or a Z hook, or better known as a French cleat hanging system. It's where you've got 2 interlocking pieces of hardware and it basically locks in flush just like that. This also ensures that the painting hangs absolutely flush to the wall. It's very flat, whereas when you use a hanger, the painting can lean out away from the wall. And then we've got the drill. I recommend if you don't have a drill, get a drill, learn how to use it because it will save a lot of time and wrist action when you're coming to screwing in and unscrewing everything. The most extreme tools that you're going to possibly need, which you can get away with not having, would be a circular saw. And I only use this because of the spacers. So to cut the spacers to size, or even to cut strips if you have a big sheet of MDF that you're using, and a planer. These are obviously extreme carpentry tools. Basically all that I would be using the planer for is to make the spacer fit perfectly. If you can instead get different variations of MDF plank to use as the spacer behind your painting, then rather do that. I just have the one thickness because I've got the tools. I just deal with it. So let's get on to putting a panel. I'll demonstrate with a panel, but it's the same principle for canvas, which has a stretcher bar, into my pre-made frame that comes from my framers. So what I first need to do is remove all the screws. Tray frames come in all sorts of depths, so it depends on the size of the painting that you're getting framed, because what we need to make sure when we put the painting inside the tray frame is that it will sit flush with the top of the tray frame. For this one, I'm only going to need 1 spacer. So one of these, which I'll have to cut. You can either use a hand saw or you can use a circular saw if you're comfortable with that. I'm going to have to cut it to size. If we lay this on top, you see here that it is sticking out. I'm going to have to plane this. So if this is already freaking you out, please don't worry. You don't have to do this yourself. You can get it done by a framer. This is only in the event that You have the tools and you have the confidence to do this yourself. I need 4 pieces of MDF that is this thickness, and I will cut them down to roughly that size. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I don't want the corners of this filler to touch, because otherwise it pushes it out and then you've got bits of wood sticking out. So better just to cut it too small, and I will secure it in place with 2 screws on each part of the frame. Let's put some protective gear on and get out the big tools and make the spacer fit the painting in the frame. All right, for this I'm going to stand up. So now that I've got these to be the same size, I know that it requires 2 goes with my planer. I'm going to cut this to the size of the painting frame rather than the size of the actual frame. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I just need to make sure that the ends of the spacers are not going to bang into each other. And I'm going to cut it with my circular saw in the studio. Okay, what could go wrong? All right, I have 4 roughly the same size. So now that the crazy DIY handyman stuff is done, we need to space everything and secure it in place so that it doesn't move around when we start screwing it in. These need to go in first, and then I'm going to put my painting in and double check that I've gotten the spacing right. It's not perfect. It's only like 1/2 mil above the edge here. Ideally, you want it flush. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to continue with it as it is, and that's when these come in handy. I use something narrow, like a blade, to just push that timber on the inside out of the way so that these can go right down, and I lay them flat. So what you do to one side, you must do to the other side, and evenly across the board. So as you can tell, these are wiggling in there and that's filling in that gap. So there was a little bit of wiggle room there. And there and there. So now this painting is absolutely wedged in there and it's perfectly even. Because I've really wedged these in there, they're not going to fall out. I'm going to do it this way. So I'm just going to flip that upside down. And I'm just going to, so the framer already put pilot holes. I'm just going to move this to make sure that the pilot hole is going to drill into the edge of the cradle. The hole itself is about 2 mils in from the inner edge of the frame. That should be fine. So I'm happy with that. If it was too close to the edge, then I would need to re-drill my pilot holes and move it in and make sure it goes into the middle of the tray frame itself. So I'm going to go ahead and drill my pilot holes, then we can screw this all together. So, put all the dust out the holes and let's start securing it in place. I'm only going to put 2 anchor points and then I'm going to flip it over just to make sure that we've got it all in the right place. So now that I've got 2 anchor points here, I'm just going to flip it over and make sure that everything is still straight. Got a whole lot of dust in there now. And now, as you can see, because I've got those 2 anchor points, it's not moving. So we can remove all our spacing items. Now we can remove those. So now the whole painting is screwed together. Get all the dust out. That's all in there. Double check the spacing. That one is perfect. Really happy with that and how that is finished at the front. Always pilot hole drill for your D-rings. And please, for the sake of your collectors, Measure the distance between the top of the frame and the hole that you screw for your D-ring. This will ensure that the top of the D-rings are the exact same height for your collector. So all they need to do is measure the distance to the top of one and then level it to the other one, rather than having to measure the distance for both individually. Hopefully you don't need to use a hanging wire for your artwork, but if you do, and it's a small scale artwork like this, hang it 1/3 down from the top of your painting. That's now all put together and it looks great from the front. You've got 2 options for your people to hang it with. And that, my friends, is how I frame my artwork. Every painting that I do gets framed in this way. So I hope that this has helped. It's been a highly requested tutorial for both Instagram and this platform. So any questions, please pop them in the comments or send me an email directly. But I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. Thanks for coming.